To move objects with precision, use snaps. The button on the main toolbar labeled Snaps Toggle will turn snaps on or off. By default, when it's on, we're going to snap to grid points in 3 dimensions. Let's investigate. Right-click on one of the magnet icons, and in the Grid and Snap Settings dialog, in the Snaps tab, we want to make sure that only grid points is enabled, and the checkboxes are off for everything else. Close the Grid and Snap Settings dialog. Positional snaps only work when a position-based tool is active. Snaps don't work with the Select Object tool, which is currently active. So for example, if I right-click in my top view, just to give it focus, and then move the cursor around, I don't see anything special happen. But if I choose the Select and Move tool, and move the cursor around, now I see a yellow box. And that's the snap cursor, which is different from the mouse cursor. The snap cursor can move in 3 dimensions, but the mouse cursor can only move in the 2 dimensions of the screen. Max uses the mouse cursor position on the screen to move the snap cursor to somewhere in the 3D world. This can get tricky sometimes, and if you're not careful, the cursor may move to an unexpected location, and you may not even realize it's happening. Later, I'll show you how to control snaps so you don't get any unpleasant surprises. Snaps have multiple modes. There's a flyout. If you hold the button down, you'll see 2D, 2.5D, or 3D snaps. 2D snaps are going to snap the cursor to something on the current construction plane. And the default construction planes are the world's XY, YZ, and ZX planes. In the top view, we're looking down on the XY plane. So you might expect if you select something, such as this pergola crossbeam, and move it around, that you're going to snap to the XY grid, but paradoxically, that doesn't work in 2D mode. And it's because in order for 2D snaps to work on a 3D object, that object must already be on the current construction plane. So with that object selected, if I send it down to a Z elevation of 0, and then click and drag in the top view, now it's actually snapping. Well, that's not terribly practical. It only works if you've got something on the construction plane already. So generally speaking, 2D snap is only useful for 2D tools, such as creating a plane primitive. So I'll undo that with Control Z and go back a couple steps until I've restored my crossbeam back where it belongs. The default mode is 3D. So let's switch that over back to 3D snaps. 3D snaps are going to snap the cursor to something in the 3D world, wherever that is. And in the case of 3D grid snaps, we're going to snap to points on the grid which is displayed in the currently active viewport. So for example, in the top view, we're going to snap to the ground plane. We're going to snap to points on the XY grid. And if I click and drag and move this around, we can see that indeed we're snapping in X and Y just fine, but we're also snapping in Z. We're sending the object down to the current viewport's grid. And we don't actually want that in that case. So we're going to see how to work around that in the next movie. I'll undo that with Control Z once again. Just to illustrate how 3D mode works a little bit more, we can see it if we go over to the left view. I'll click on something in the left view and move it around, and we can see that it's moving in the world's Y and Z axes, but it's snapping to an X position of 0. We can see that over in the front view. The axis tripod in the lower left corner shows the orientation of the world axes, and it shows me that in the left view, I'm looking at the YZ plane. So I'm snapping in world Y and world Z, and I'm snapping to a world X value of 0. Okay, so again, I'm going to undo that with Control Z. So 3D mode can be a bit problematic. We're going to take a look at the solutions to this in the next movie.